Hey, how's it going, everybody? Coach Kyle here, and today I want to address a question that I had from a newer client of mine about the strength work I'm having him do. He specifically asked about how to know if he is performing the movements with proper technique. If you've ever wondered about using this proper technique or form during your strength exercises, then you need to pay attention, especially if you have used the fear of improper technique as an excuse to not do strength work. One thing that's very important to keep in mind is that the actual strength work that I have my clients perform rarely includes actually lifting really heavy weights, whatever heavy is to you, the individual. The big majority of my exercises and movements that my runners perform are body weight exercises and very running specific jumping exercises. I only do actually heavy lifting if an individual specifically requests routines that include using a squat rack, heavy deadlifts, for example. Otherwise, I typically don't prescribe such things. So now that we have that out of the way, let's move on to the question of what is proper form. In my opinion, good form is safe and works the appropriate or the targeted muscle groups. That's it. A big misconception I often see is that people should have perfect form or not do the exercise, or at least not do any exercise with any good amount of weight. This may be the case with big lifts when you're a fairly new lifter still. But when it comes to step-ups, body weight lunges, body weight squats, squat jumps, you don't have to overanalyze it. Don't get analysis paralysis and think that you need perfect technique to have good technique. Sometimes I feel there is this misconception about perfect technique where if you don't have perfect technique, you're just going to ruin your back or your knees, but that's not really the case. David Delanave, an International All-Round Weightlifting Association world record holder, suggests that there is only one rule when it comes to form, and that is to avoid pain. He says that, and to quote, "As far as bad form goes, the only hard and fast rule is pain. Exercise should never hurt, and pain is a number one signal to change something. If it hurts while you're doing it, stop. Change positions until you find something that works, or stop completely on that day on that movement. If things start to hurt later on or the next day, you need to be a little detective and figure out what it was you were doing and change it for next time." So I've experienced this myself personally years back while I was doing lunges. And coincidentally, a client of mine commented on this recently as well, where he said he had never thought about doing lunges stepping backwards. He's always just done them moving forwards. But I told him that in the past I've had knee pain during forward lunges, the return to the standing part. It caused my knees to ache. So I stopped doing that, and I've just habitually, the reverse lunge was able to be performed without my knee aching, and now I just do them habitually because they cause no pain. Another example would be the cambered, easy, or curved bar that you've probably seen people lifting with at the gym. Instead of just a straight bar across, it's curved a little bit. For most people, using the curved bar is going to be least effective for building biceps versus a straight bar because of the angle of your hands. However, myself, I've noticed that the straight bar negatively impacts how my wrists feel because I've had a couple falls on the trail and my wrists can't quite handle the straight bar in that position. So I prefer the curved bar, even if it's not technically as effective as a straight bar with the narrow grip for your biceps. Yet that form, which many would consider optimal or better or best, is a horrible idea for me because it makes my right wrist ache. Again, we're coming back to the idea that unless an optimal form is pain-free, it's not an optimal form. What about when it is not about avoiding injury, but just about doing the movements in general? Paul Ingram from PainScience.com, a fantastic website, said, and I quote, "I suspect training people to lift properly probably doesn't work because backs are actually tough as good boots. And what makes backs hurt or get injured isn't influenced all that much by the lifting technique as long as you aren't really being foolish about it. The conventional wisdom is based on an assumption of fragility that just doesn't exist in the back. So it's not too surprising that the difference is there is no vulnerability to avoid. You're not just automatically a fragile runner if you're starting with the appropriate weight, which in the case of my clients is no weight. In 1997, Dr. Norton Hadler wrote a paper for the journal Spine with a subtitle of "What you lift or how you lift matters far less than whether you lift or when." And in 2002, physical therapist Leon Stracker said that there is little evidence to support the effectiveness of training programs to change a worker's lifting habit, and any attempt at change may just increase risk as workers lose the protection of well-practiced and conditioned movement patterns. And more recently, in a paper in 2008, after a review of the literature by Martino titled "Effect of Training and Lifting Equipment to Prevent Back Pain in Lifting and Handling," so we're talking about workers lifting at a warehouse, for example, it suggested that, and I quote, "There is no evidence to support the use of or advice for training techniques for preventing back pain or consequent disability. The findings challenge current widespread practice of advising workers on correct lifting technique." You've probably seen the signs in the workplace. And I think this was about lifting with your legs, not with your back. So if you pull up the Pain Science article about not worrying about lifting technique, you'll read a great deal more. It's a fantastic article of science-backed arguments for not worrying quite as much about your technique. And that entire article is talking about actually lifting in the workplace all the way to powerlifting as mentioned as well. And I'm simply talking about body weight squats and lunges here, people. It's not rocket science. I don't want to downplay the importance of adequate form, but it doesn't need to be perfect form to get the job done. On that subject, let's get back to the technique of this. Let's get back to the topic of this proper technique and how I make sure my clients are using it. I don't want to sound like it's a cop-out. I don't really worry about it that much. I try to make it clear that the number one rule is to not do anything that causes discomfort or pain, running or weightlifting or just doing squats or lunges. Outside of that, if you are doing one-legged deadlifts without weight, chances are you're totally fine. And this reminds me of another comment a runner told me recently where I had him going through what I thought was a very simple exercise routine. Yet he said that it requires a lot of study because in the Basu ball video, crunch video, the instructional video that I linked to from YouTube, it had a lady with a long list of instructions, and he was worried about memorizing them and doing the Basu ball crunch so perfectly that he didn't actually do it. He said, and I quote, "Otherwise I'm going to do them wrong." But my thinking is that, and like I said before, if there's no discomfort, you're probably not doing them wrong. You're probably doing them just fine. He was experiencing analysis paralysis and didn't even do the routine. One of the things that I regularly hear from people is that the simplicity and common sense of my videos and suggestions was part of what initially attracted them to me as a coach. So I don't want to sound like I'm saying just don't worry about it, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Like I said before, if you're not experiencing any discomfort, I really think you're probably doing the crunches just fine. And realistically here, we're not talking about doing reps of 80 to 90% of your 1 rep max. We're talking about doing squats with just your body weight, or maybe a small bar with some small plates on them. We're not talking about lifting huge weights again here, people. Let's not get carried away and make something that should be simple too complicated. Do the work first, then worry about the tiny little details. But you gotta get squatting. If you have any comments, suggestions, I'm sure I'll get some. Let me know. But as always, you know this. You keep running and lifting. I'll keep coaching.